The wreath was still hanging on my front door when my daughter-in-law told me I wasn't allowed in the living room during the party. She didn't ask, she informed me, the way you inform a child that bedtime is at 8. "It'll just be easier," she said, already walking away. "You know how you get overwhelmed in crowds." I had never once in my 69 years been overwhelmed in a crowd. But I stood in my own hallway in the house I had bought with my own money in 1991, 32 years before she ever set foot in it, and I said nothing. That was a Thursday. By the following Monday I had called my attorney, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Dorothy, and this is my house. I want to make that clear right now, because the story you're about to hear will confuse you if you don't understand that one fact from the beginning. The deed has my name on it. Only my name. I bought this house the year my son Nathan was in 3rd grade, when his father and I were still saving up for the wedding. I paid the down payment with money I inherited from my mother. My husband George, God rest him, always said it was my house, even after 30 years of marriage. He meant it as a joke. I never forgot that he said it. George passed 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I didn't have time to prepare, which I think is probably a mercy, because if I had known it was coming, I might have spent those weeks grieving instead of just being with him. After the funeral, Nathan came to me with an idea. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had helped him with his homework for 12 years, and he said that he and his wife Rachel and their 2 boys wanted to move in, to help me. He said I shouldn't be alone in a big house. The house has 4 bedrooms and 2.5 baths. It is not a big house. But I understood what he meant, and part of me was grateful because the silence after George died was the kind that presses against your ears. I said yes. I told Nathan one thing when we made the arrangement. I said, "This is still my home. I live here too." He said, "Of course, Mom. Of course it is." I believed him. Rachel moved in on a Saturday in February. By Sunday evening, she had rearranged the kitchen. Not reorganized, rearranged. My dishes were in different cabinets. The coffee maker was on the other side of the counter. My cast iron skillet, the one I had seasoned for 22 years, was in the back of a lower cabinet behind a Dutch oven I had never seen before in my life. I moved things back the next morning. She moved them again by Wednesday. I told myself it was an adjustment period. I told myself she was nesting, that this was what young women did when they moved somewhere new. I had done it myself. I remembered the particular pleasure of arranging a new kitchen, the satisfaction of putting things where they made sense to you. I gave her that. What I did not give her was permission to throw anything away. She did it anyway. The first thing I noticed was George's coffee mug. It was a terrible mug, brown ceramic with a chipped handle, a gift from Nathan when he was about 11 years old, one of those painted at the pottery studio pieces that kids make where the glaze comes out uneven and slightly lopsided. George had used it every single morning for 25 years. I kept it on the second shelf because I could not bring myself to use it, but I needed to see it. One day it was gone. I asked Rachel where it was. She said she had cleared out some of the older things, the ones that looked worn. She said she hadn't thought it was anything special. She said it kindly, which was almost worse. Nathan, when I told him that evening, rubbed the back of his neck and said he was sure it was an accident. He said Rachel hadn't known. He said maybe it was in a box somewhere. It wasn't in a box somewhere. I went to sleep that night and I thought about how George had wrapped both hands around that ugly mug every morning. He was a big man and the mug was small and he always looked faintly ridiculous holding it. I thought about that for a long time before I fell asleep. I did not say anything more about the mug. I had made a decision years ago that I would not be the kind of mother-in-law who made her son's life difficult. George and I had talked about it in the abstract before Nathan was even married. We agreed that when children build their own lives, you step back, you support, you do not insert yourself into every disagreement. I had held to that. I held to it now. But something had shifted. The boys, my grandsons Tyler and Cody, 15 and 13, had settled into the house with the particular confidence of young men who assume every space exists for their comfort. The television in the living room was always on something they had chosen. The kitchen after school was a wreckage of cereal boxes and half-eaten sandwiches. They were not unkind to me exactly. They just didn't really see me. Once, I was sitting in the armchair in the living room, my armchair, where I had read every book I had read for the last decade. And Cody walked in, looked directly at me, and said to Tyler, "Is anyone using the good chair?" Tyler looked at me, too. Then he looked back at his brother and shrugged. I got up and went to the kitchen. I am 69 years old, and I have some pride, but I also know when a battle is too small to fight. I got up. I went to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea. That was October. By November, Rachel had begun what I can only describe as a campaign of gradual replacement. It started subtly: new throw pillows on the couch, a different rug in the entryway, then a new light fixture in the dining room, then curtains in the living room, heavy linen ones in a gray I found oppressive, replacing the cream ones I had hung 15 years ago. Each change was small. Each change was, on its own, defensible. Homes evolve. People update things. I am not a woman who mistakes her preferences for universal law. But it was my home. And no one asked me. I mentioned the curtains to Nathan. I said gently that I wished he had talked to me first. He said Rachel had just been trying to help freshen things up. He said I should appreciate that she was investing in the house. He said, and this is the one I have thought about many times since, he said, "Mom, you can't expect everything to stay exactly the way it was." He was not wrong. I knew he was not wrong. George was gone, and things do not stay the way they were, and I am not a foolish woman who thinks they should. But I was not talking about George. I was talking about curtains. I let it go. December arrived, and with it came Rachel's plans for Christmas. I should say that Christmas has always been important in this house. George and I hosted it for 30 years. I have a box of ornaments that Nathan made in elementary school, paper chains and popsicle stick frames, and a clay handprint from 1994 that has survived every move and every year without a single crack. I have a specific way of arranging the tree. I have a specific tablecloth, red linen with embroidered holly, that my mother made by hand and gave to me the first Christmas George and I were married. I have traditions. Rachel had a vision. She wanted to host a Christmas party, a real party, she said, for their friends. She showed me pictures on her phone of the kind of party she had in mind: white and gold, everything, eucalyptus and candles, a grazing table, a photo wall. It was beautiful, I told her, genuinely. She has good taste, I will give her that. But I also said, we have always done Christmas a certain way in this house. She nodded and said that was sweet and went back to making her list. The week before the party, the garage happened. George's things were in the garage. Not junk, meaningful things. His workbench, his tools, carefully arranged on a pegboard the way he had arranged them for 30 years. Several boxes of his books, ones I wasn't ready to donate yet. A cedar chest with his military dress uniform from before we were married, and his father's before that, things I intended to leave to Nathan one day. I came home from my Tuesday morning book club to find the garage door open and Tyler and Cody hauling boxes to the curb. I stood in the driveway. I said, "What are you doing?" Tyler said, "Mom asked us to clear out some space for the party stuff." I walked inside. Rachel was in the kitchen on her phone. I stood in the doorway until she looked up. I said, "Those are my husband's things." She said she knew, but we needed space for the folding tables and the extra chairs, and the garage was really the only option. And she had meant to mention it, but things had been so busy, and anyway, most of it was just old boxes. And she was sure we could sort through it properly after the holidays. Just old boxes. I went back to the garage. I told the boys to stop. They looked at each other and then went inside. And I stood there among George's things, and I looked at his workbench and the pegboard and the spaces where he had outlined each tool in marker so he could always see at a glance if something was missing. He had done that himself. He had been meticulous about it. I stood there for a long time. Then I went to my bedroom. I closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed. I thought about the mug. I thought about the curtains. I thought about my armchair. I thought about being told I would be more comfortable in my room during the party, the way you tell a dog to go lie down somewhere out of the way. I thought about Nathan, who had sat at my kitchen table and said, "Of course, Mom. Of course it is." I picked up my phone and I called my attorney. His name is Warren, and he has handled my affairs for 15 years, and he is the kind of man who does not require a great deal of explanation before he understands the situation. I said, "Warren, I need to know the process for asking someone to vacate my property." He told me. I asked him to begin. I did not tell Nathan. I did not tell Rachel. I went about the next 2 weeks in the same way I had gone about the previous 10 months, quietly, reasonably, without drama. I helped with what I was asked to help with. I stayed out of the way of what I was not invited into. I attended my book club on Tuesdays. I called my friend Helen on Sunday mornings. The party was on a Saturday, the 19th of December. Rachel had transformed the living room. I will acknowledge that freely. It was genuinely beautiful, the white and gold, the candles, the long table set with things I had never seen before, rented probably, or bought. My red linen tablecloth with the embroidered holly was not on the table. I did not ask where it was. 40 people came. I know because I counted from the top of the stairs before I went to my room. I had been told, kindly, it was always kindly, that was the particular texture of it, that I might be more comfortable upstairs, that the noise might be a lot, that Rachel's friends could be a bit much, and she knew I didn't always love big groups. I went upstairs. I sat in the chair by the window in my bedroom and I listened to the party in my house. I could hear music and laughter and the particular loud happiness of people who are having a good time and have no reason to think about anyone else. I could hear Rachel's voice above the others, animated and warm. She is good with people. I have always known that. Nathan came up once, around 9 o'clock. He knocked on my door and asked if I needed anything. I said no. He stood in the doorway for a moment with an expression I recognized. Not guilt, exactly, but the discomfort of a man who knows something is wrong and has decided, again, not to look at it directly. He said, "You okay, Mom?" I said, "I'm fine, Nathan." He nodded. He went back downstairs. I thought about the 30 Christmases in this house. I thought about the year Nathan was 7 and woke up at 4 in the morning and tried to sneak down to the tree. And George caught him on the stairs, and instead of sending him back to bed, just sat down on the step with him, and they waited together until the sun came up. Nathan had told me that story as an adult, told me he still thought about it, that it was one of the things he thought about when he thought about his father. I wondered if he thought about it now downstairs at the party. I turned off my light at 10:30. The notice was delivered on the 27th of December. Warren had a process server handle it, which was cleaner. I was in the kitchen when it happened, drinking my coffee, when I heard the knock at the front door and then a long silence. And then Rachel's voice, very different from the voice at the party. She came into the kitchen. She was holding the envelope. She said, "What is this?" I said, "It's a notice to vacate. You have 60 days. She stared at me. She said my name, Dorothy, in a way that had several emotions in it at once. I said, "The house is in my name. It has always been in my name. Warren will send you the documentation if you need to see it, but I think you already know that." She said, "You can't do this." I said, "I can." I looked into it carefully. Nathan appeared in the doorway. He must have heard her voice from the other room. He looked at the envelope and then at me, and his face went through several things quickly. He said, Mom, what?" I said, "Nathan, I love you. I want you to know that clearly because I need you to understand that this isn't about not loving you. This is about my house." He said, "We can talk about this. We can figure this out." I said, "I spent 10 months trying to talk about things, the coffee mug, the curtains, the garage." He was quiet. I said, "Your father's tools were moved to the curb without anyone asking me. His things were called old boxes. I was asked to stay in my room during a party in my own home. I stayed, Nathan. I didn't make a scene. I went upstairs and I sat in my chair and I listened." He looked at his hands. I said, 60 days is enough time to make other arrangements. Warren can give you the exact date. Rachel said something then, sharper than anything she'd said before, something about how this was unbelievable and I was being vindictive, and that this would destroy the family. I said, "I'm not being vindictive. I'm going to live in my house." She left the kitchen. I heard her on the phone a few minutes later in the bedroom, her voice low and tight. Nathan stayed. He sat down at the kitchen table, the same chair he had always sat in, and he put his face in his hands. I poured him a cup of coffee. I sat across from him. I said, "I'm not doing this to hurt you." He said, "I know." I said, "I don't think you do, actually. I think somewhere you thought I wouldn't." He was quiet again for a long time. Then he said, "I should have handled things differently." I said, "Yes, you should have." It was the most honest conversation we had had in a year. It did not fix anything. Honest conversations rarely fix things immediately. They just clear the ground. Rachel did not speak to me after that. She moved through the house with a particular charged silence that I recognized as the silence of someone who is furious and has decided that fury is dignity. I did not take it personally. I understood it. If I were 41 years old and had been building a life in a place that turned out not to be mine to build in, I would have been furious too. The boys were confused. Tyler asked me once a few weeks in why this was happening. He said it in a genuinely curious way, not an accusatory one, and I thought about how to answer him. I said, "This is my home, Tyler. It has been my home for 32 years. Do you understand what that means?" He thought about it. He said, "I think so." I said, "When you have a home someday, a real one that you've built, you'll understand completely." He nodded. He seemed to turn something over. He said, "I'm sorry about the boxes in the garage. I didn't know they were important." I said, "I know you didn't. I meant it. They were out by the end of February. Nathan found a rental house about 12 minutes away, which was far enough and not too far. He called me the week after they moved to tell me they were settled. He said Tyler had asked if he could still come by sometimes." I said, "Of course." I spent the first week alone in the house doing nothing in particular. I made coffee in the mornings. I sat in my armchair. I found the red linen tablecloth in a box in the hall closet. Folded correctly, I noticed, the way my mother had taught me to fold it. I put it back on the dining room table where it belongs. George's tools are back on the pegboard. I didn't do it myself. My neighbor Bill helped me carry everything back in on a Saturday morning. He didn't ask why it needed to be done, just showed up when I asked and helped and drank a cup of coffee after. There are things I wish had been different. I wish Nathan had been the kind of man who could have looked his mother in the eye and said, "Wait, this is wrong, stop." I think some part of him is still becoming that man. I think grief does strange things to the children we raise, makes them retreat into whoever is closest, and I try to hold some patience for that even when it is difficult. I have Tyler over on Tuesday afternoons. He eats a lot and talks about things I mostly don't understand, games mostly, and something involving video tournaments that I have stopped trying to follow. And sometimes we just sit in the same room, which is its own kind of company. Nathan calls on Sunday mornings. We are building something. It is slow and careful, and neither of us has said much directly about what happened, but I think it is real. The house is quiet in the way I have come to appreciate. Not empty quiet, present quiet. The kind that belongs to a place that knows what it is and who it belongs to. I open the windows in the morning when the weather allows. The yard needs some work in the spring. I have been thinking about planting something along the back fence. Lilacs, maybe, or something that blooms early, something to look forward to in February when everything is still gray. George loved that yard. He would come in from working out there on summer evenings with dirt on his knees, and that particular satisfied look of a man who has done something real with his hands, something that will still be there tomorrow. I think about that when I look out the kitchen window. This is my home. It has always been my home. I just had to remind a few people of that, quietly and through the proper legal channels, and now we all understand each other a great deal better. I think that's enough.